Good evening, everyone. This class is Missiles 101, so if you are not here for that, or if you are here for that, rather, you're in the right spot. This class will be given over Mumble here and in lecture.E-UNI, is where I'll be linking all of the relevant modules and such. And for the first link, I'm going to give you this picture. Enjoy. My name is Aflixion Starr, and I'll be your teacher tonight. I started playing EVE at the beginning of August, and I joined E-UNI at the end of August. I'm a member of the LSC, LoSec campus in EVE University, and I love teaching, which is why I became a teacher for EVE University. Rules for this class. Please have your Mumble configured to push to talk so that we don't hear everything that's going on in the background of your house. Please be in lecture.E-UNI. That's the in-game channel where I'll be linking everything. Please be docked up. And the syllabus that I will be following is now linked in lecture.E-UNI. Are there any questions before I get started? All right. So the main advantages that you get with missiles are that they cannot miss. If you are within range, then your missiles will hit. You can select the damage type that you want to deal, either electromagnetic, thermal, kinetic, or explosive, depending on the missile that you choose. Missile launchers do not use any capacitor whatsoever, and you deal pretty consistent damage to a target. Some disadvantages are that the missile damage is delayed because the projectile actually needs to travel to your target, as opposed to turrets where the damage is instantaneous. And because the projectile needs to travel, the missile can be outrun by very fast ships, such as interceptors. And the larger missiles are very bad against small ships. So if you have a cruise missile, a battleship-sized weapon, and you fire it at a frigate, it's going to be very, very ineffective. Speaking of the different sizes of the missiles, we have 4 different sizes here. And each size has 2 different versions, short range and long range. The short range version for frigate-sized ships is the rocket. And I'll link an example of a rocket in lecture.E-UNI. Rockets are fired from rocket launchers. The long-range version is a light missile, and these are fired from light missile launchers, that's the frigate-sized module, and rapid light missile launchers, which are the cruiser-sized launchers. Now, if we look at the details of the rocket that I linked, you'll see that it has a maximum velocity of 2,250 meters per second and has a flight time of 2 seconds, which puts its range at 4.5 kilometers. That is very short range. On the other hand, if you take a look at the light missile, it has a maximum velocity of 3,750 meters per second and a flight time of 5 seconds, which puts you at, oh, why didn't I pre-calculate this? That puts you at 18,750 meters. Significantly longer range than the rockets. The trade-off, though, is that the light missile does 83 damage, and the rocket does... That doesn't seem right. The rocket does 33 damage. However, the rocket launcher shoots once every 5 seconds, and the light missile launcher shoots once every 15 seconds. So rockets will fire much faster than missiles. And so therefore will do more damage. For cruiser-sized weapons, we have heavy assault missiles, which are launched from heavy assault missile launchers, and we have heavy missiles, which are launched from heavy missile launchers and rapid heavy missile launchers. The heavy missile launcher is a cruiser-sized module, and the rapid heavy missile launcher is a battleship-sized module. For battleship-sized weapons, we have torpedoes launched from torpedo launchers and cruise missiles launched from cruise missile launchers. I should mention the heavy assault missile is the short-range version, the heavy missile is the long-range version, and the torpedo is the short-range version, and the cruise missile is the long-range version. Note that there is no rapid cruise missile launcher. It does not make sense because the only thing bigger than a battleship is a capital ship. And capital ships have their own class of missiles. The capital ships have Citadel missiles. Citadel torpedo is the short-range version, and Citadel cruise missile is the long-range version. Are there any questions about this so far? Am I going too fast? Am I not going in depth? I'd like to note that I will be covering more detail about how to calculate the range and the damage of your missiles in a few minutes. Okay. Now, so far I've only linked Inferno missiles. The Inferno missiles do thermal damage. There are three other damage types. There are Mjolnir missiles. And I'll link an example of a rocket. A Mjolnir missile will deal electromagnetic damage. A Nova missile will deal explosive damage. And a Scourge missile will deal kinetic damage. And generally, Mjolnir and Inferno are the best ones to use against shields, because those are the lowest resistances for shields. And Nova and Scourge are best to use against armor, because those are the lowest resistances for armor. Now, from now on, I'm not going to be linking the other damage types. I'll only be linking the Inferno types. Just know that what I'm saying about them applies to all missiles, not just the Inferno. Now we have Tech 2 missiles. First type is a Rage missile. This is a version of the short-range missiles that will help it deal more damage to larger targets. The other Tech 2 missile for short range is Javelin. The Javelin missiles are not really used all that much, because all they do is they increase the range of the short range missile. For long range missiles, we have Fury missiles. These are also increased damage against larger targets. And the other Tech 2 missile type is Precision missile. Precision missile will do more damage against smaller targets, which is useful once you get up above light missiles. We also have a couple of specialized missile types, and these only apply to long-range missiles. So light missiles, heavy missiles, and cruise missiles, and Citadel cruise missiles. We have Defender missiles. These are basically used to shoot down incoming missiles. And because they aren't very reliable, it's really RNG based, it's not used very much, not even in PvE. We also have auto-targeting missiles. These auto-targeting missiles will shoot at the closest hostile ship that has aggressed you. So these are good in situations where you are jammed out and cannot target something, or you are damped to the point where nothing is in range for you to target. And I've been linking the smallest missile types so far. These apply to all missile sizes. Any questions? All right. So I kind of alluded to calculating the range earlier, but the exact formula that you should use to calculate the range of the missile is multiplying the missile velocity by the missile flight time. So if we take the Inferno Fury light missile, for example, the Fury light missile has a maximum velocity of 3,750 meters per second and a flight time of 3.75 seconds. So if we multiply those two, we get 14 kilometers. Now, if you shoot this missile from 14 kilometers out, you are going to miss, because the missile does have an acceleration time, and it doesn't travel in a straight line. It travels in an arc. So your actual effective range is about 10% lower than the listed max range. So instead of shooting it from 14 kilometers out, shoot it from 12.5 kilometers. And that's when you should be able to hit your target every time. Another thing that we need to look at is the damage that a missile does. And in order to determine how much damage the missile actually does, we need to look at two properties. If I'm looking at a rocket, the Scourge rocket specifically, you look at the attributes on it, you want to look for explosion velocity and explosion radius. The explosion velocity is a measure of about how fast the explosion will travel. And the explosion radius is an approximation of about how big the explosion is. And contrary to what you might think, a bigger explosion does less damage to a smaller ship. So, if a ship is traveling faster than the missile's explosion velocity, the ship will take less damage than the maximum listed. And if the ship is smaller than the missile's explosion radius, then the ship will also take less damage. So for comparison, the Scourge rocket has an explosion radius of 20 meters. And the Citadel torpedo has an explosion radius of 2,000 meters. The Citadel torpedo is going to do almost no damage to a frigate, which has a signature radius of about 40 meters. The rocket, however, will do full damage to a frigate if you're looking at the explosion radius. Of course, if the frigate is traveling faster than 150 meters per second, which most frigates usually do, then they'll take less damage because of that. Is everybody following me so far? If you would like more information about the exact formula for how explosion radius and velocity affect the missile damage, you can look at the wiki page called Missile Damage, linked now in lecture.E-UNI. But the basic things you want to remember are, if the explosion radius is less than the target's signature radius, you'll do more damage. And if the explosion velocity is greater than the ship's velocity, you'll do more damage. Next, we'll go over a few modules that you can use to help your missile damage. The first one is an internal module, meaning that only your ship fitted with this module will help your damage. And there's only one in this category, and that is the Ballistic Control System. The Ballistic Control System will increase your missile damage by 7% for Tech 1, and will increase your rate of fire by 7.5% for Tech 1. The Tech 2 version of a Ballistic Control System increases your missile damage by 10% and your rate of fire by 10.5%. And do note that this is subject to stacking penalties. The next two modules are external modules, meaning that a friend can help you. If these are fitted to a friend's or a fleet mate's or even an enemy person's ship and used on your target ship, then they will also help your your missile damage. This first one is a Target Painter. Target Painter increases the target's signature radius. Tech 1 version is 25%. And Tech 2 version is 30%. And I believe the meta version is the same. Yes, the meta version, meta 4, linked here, is also a 30% increase. This is also subject to stacking penalties. The other module that helps your missile damage is a Stasis Web of Fire. And what this does is it reduces your target's maximum velocity. The Tech 1 version reduces it by 50%, and the Tech 2 and Meta 4 versions reduce it by 60%. Remember, we want the target's signature radius to be bigger than our explosion radius, and we want our target's velocity to be lower than our explosion velocity to maximize our damage. And there are also 3 modules that, if your target has them fitted, and in the case of the micro warp drive, if they are using it, then this will also increase your damage against them. A micro warp drive will multiply your target's signature radius by 6. That's really good for us, really bad for them. Also, if your target is shield tanked, then if they have any shield extenders or shield rigs or anything like that, those also increase the signature radius, but by a much smaller percentage than a micro warp drive. And finally, if your target is fit with inertia stabilizers, then their signature radius has also been increased, and they will take more damage from you. From your missiles, specifically. Any questions so far? Okay. We have a few different rigs that can be used for missiles. And they are conveniently located under the Missile Launcher Rigs section of your market view. Finally, a question. Lair Divinity asks, so Missile Launcher 5 plus Ballistic Control System 2 equals a 20% rate of fire increase. That is correct. The bonuses that you get from skills are not subject to stacking penalties. Stacking penalties only apply to modules and rigs. So Missile Launcher Operation 5, it's a skill that we'll get to later. It gives you a 10% increase to your missile launcher rate of fire. A ballistic control system gives you a 10.5% increase to your rate of fire. So it's actually a little bit more than 20%. Or it might actually be a little bit less, depending on if it's multiplicative or not. Which I think it should be multiplicative. Either way, it's about 20% increase. So the rigs that we have, first one is a Bay Loading Accelerator. And this, surprise, surprise, gives you a rate of fire bonus, 10% for Tech 1. The drawback for this rig is that your missile launchers will take more CPU to fit. And missile launchers already take a lot of CPU. The next rig is Hydraulic Bay Frustr. And this gives your missiles a 15% bonus to their maximum velocity, which is effectively a range increase. It has the same drawback of increased CPU requirement. The rocket fuel cache partition will increase the flight time of your missiles by 15%. Again, with the same increased CPU requirement for launchers. This is also effectively a range increase. The Warhead Catalyst increases your missile damage by 10%, with an increased CPU requirement as the drawback. The Flair Catalyst increases the explosion velocity of the missile by 15%. So this will make it more effective at hitting faster targets. Or not at hitting, but at doing damage to faster targets. And finally, the Rigger Catalyst increases or decreases the explosion radius by 15%. This will help you do more damage to smaller targets. Are there any questions about the rigs? Okay. The last prepared subject that I have is the skills that are applied to missiles. And this is a very lengthy list. The first skill, the most important one, missile launcher operation. This is the skill that is required to fit all of the missile launchers, all the way from rocket launchers to, I believe, the Citadel launchers, or yes. The Citadel torpedo and cruise launchers require missile launcher operation 5. The side bonus is that each level of this skill gives you a 2% bonus to your rate of fire. However, unlike turrets, you don't just need to be able to fit the launchers, you need to be able to load the missiles. With turrets, if you can fit the launcher, then you can load the ammo. With missiles, you have to fit the launcher, and then you need to train up a separate skill for each type of missile that you want to load. So if you want to load rockets, you'll train the rockets skill. If you want to load light missiles, then you'll fit the light missiles skill. Heavy assault missiles, you'll train the heavy assault missile skill, etc., all the way up through Citadel torpedoes and cruise missiles. Each of these skills gives you a 5% bonus to your damage with that type of missile per skill level. So at level 5 for each one, you'll have a 25% bonus to your damage. Correct, Lara. You cannot launch all those missiles with one launcher. Each missile has its own launcher type, which I linked earlier in the class. Note that light missiles and heavy missiles have two launcher types. Light missiles can be loaded into light missile launchers and rapid light missile launchers. Same thing for heavy missiles. They can be loaded into heavy missile launchers and rapid heavy missile launchers. The difference between a regular light missile launcher and a rapid light missile launcher: the regular launchers only take 10 seconds to reload, and the rapid light missile launchers take 40 seconds to reload. Other than that, they function exactly as you think they would. The rapid launchers launch much faster than the regular launchers. But the trade-off is the rapid launcher can only hold a very limited number of missiles. This was a recent change in the Rubicon expansion. Before the expansion, a month ago, a rapid light missile launcher, the the Meta 4 launcher, would hold 72 light missiles. After the patch, it holds 18. However, the rate of fire was significantly increased. So a cruiser with rapid light missile launchers will fire many more missiles per second than a regular light missile launcher. I think it's 2 or 3 second cycle time with skills. It's incredibly fast, but you will run out of ammo very quickly. And then you'll spend 40 seconds reloading. Now for the sub-capital missiles, so everything except the Citadel missiles, the Citadel torpedoes and cruise missiles, Citadel cruise missiles, that is. All of the sub-capital missiles have a specialization skill. This specialization skill is required to fit the Tech 2 launchers. And to use the Tech 2 missiles, which will only go into the Tech 2 launcher. These specialization skills also have the side effect of giving you another rate of fire bonus, 2% per level, only to the Tech 2 launchers. So if you have rocket specialization trained to level 5, and you have a rocket launcher 2, then you will have whatever rate of fire bonus you have from missile launcher operation, and the 10% bonus from rocket specialization. And that's a very good question. Kokis Ohaya asks, can you use Tech 1 missiles in Tech 2 launchers? And the answer is yes. This is why I think every time, if you can fit the Tech 2 launcher, you should. Because it gets a double bonus from the rate of fire for missile launcher operation and the missile specialization skill. You'll notice that the requirement for the missile specialization skill, for rocket specialization, which I've linked, is level 5 in the base rocket skill. And this holds true for all of the specializations. So if you look at cruise missile specialization, for example, it requires level 5 in cruise missiles. And cruise missiles is a rank 5 skill. Meaning that it will take a long time to train for it. I currently have cruise missiles at level 3, and I'm currently mapped, my attributes are mapped to perception and willpower, which is the map that you need for missiles. And even just getting cruise missiles from level 3 to level 5 is going to take me 21 days. So it's a big commitment to get the Tech 2 missiles, but it is worth it if you plan on using those missiles. Now the Defender missiles also have their own skill. You must have at least Defender Missiles 1 to load any Defender missiles. And this will give you a 5% bonus to the maximum velocity of Defender missiles per skill level. And we also have auto-targeting missiles. Remember that the auto-targeting missiles only have light, heavy, and cruise variants. And this skill will also give you 5% bonus to those missiles damage per level. Now we have a few support skills to go along with this. First one is Rapid Launch. This gives you a 3% bonus to your rate of fire per skill level. So this is effectively a DPS increase by increasing the number of missiles you shoot per second. We have Guided Missile Precision. And even though it says guided missile, this applies to all missiles. There used to be a distinction between the short-range and long-range missiles, where the long-range missiles were called guided missiles. That is no longer the case. All missiles benefit from all of these support skills. But Guided Missile Precision decreases the explosion radius of your missiles by 5% per skill level. So this will help you do more damage to smaller targets. Next up, we have two kind of paired skills. Missile Bombardment. Missile Bombardment is a 10% bonus to your missile's maximum flight time per level. And Missile Projection is a 10% bonus to your missile's maximum velocity per level. These are both range increases. However, Missile Projection will also help your missiles catch very fast targets, such as interceptors. To help do more damage to those very fast targets, we have Target Navigation Prediction. This gives you a 10% bonus to your missile's explosion velocity. Remember, we want the target's velocity to be less than the explosion velocity, and we can achieve this by either slowing them down or increasing the explosion velocity. And last but certainly not least, we have Warhead Upgrades. This is a flat 2% damage boost per level. Missiles will do 2% more damage per level. Now I know that was a lot of information in 45 minutes. So don't be embarrassed if you have any questions, if you need me to explain something in more detail than I have. That's the end of everything I have prepared. I'll open up to a Q&A session. You may use Mumble to ask your questions, or you may type them out. But please let me know that you are typing a question. Kokis Ohaya asks, why go missiles instead of guns? I kind of brushed over this at the beginning, but the main advantage is that missiles will always hit if you are in range. There's no such thing as tracking with missiles. There's only, is the missile or is the target in range of your missiles? The other major advantage is that you will be able to choose your damage type. Whereas with lasers or energy, lasers are energy turrets, lasers or hybrid turrets, you're stuck on certain damage types. So if you know your opponent has an electromagnetic hole in their resistances, you use the Mjolnir missiles, and you will do only electromagnetic damage. Lara Divinity asks, are there any implants that boost missile damage or range? And the answer is yes. You have the Launcher CPU Efficiency series, which will decrease the CPU need of your missile launchers. You have the cruise missile implants, which will increase the damage of your cruise missiles. Torpedo series, which increase the damage of your torpedoes. The Missile Bombardment series will increase your missile's flight time. Missile Projection series will increase your missile velocity. Heavy Assault missiles to increase the damage of your heavy assault missiles. Heavy missiles to increase the damage of your heavy missiles, etc. You can find these by going to the market, going implants and boosters, implants, skill hardwiring, missile implants. And make sure that you don't have show only available checked in the bottom left. Make sure that is unchecked to see everything that you can. Cylon Steel, I did see your question. I'm going to answer the next one because it relates to the current topic, and then I'll come back to yours. Next question is Akis Coites. He asks, do those implants replace the plus attribute ones used for skill training? And the answer is no. These implants go in the slots 6 through 10. The attribute implants go in slots 1 through 5. Silent Steel asks, do Defender missiles also work on cruise missiles and torpedoes? And the answer is yes. Defender missiles work on any incoming missiles. Do note that there are only light and heavy Defender missiles, but that just determines what launcher they go into. Are there any more questions? Thane Shemaiah asks, are there any tactics that missile users should be aware of in PvP? In my experience, most missile users will be using the short-range missiles. They'll get right on top of you, and they will just keep shooting you with their missiles. The other tactic that I've seen is kiting. And the important thing to remember with missiles, it's the range that it tells you is the maximum distance that the missile can travel. So if you are chasing someone and you are at the edge of your missile range, you will always miss, because the distance from where the missile is launched to where the target ends up is longer than the maximum range. However, if you are kiting someone and they are following you, then they are moving closer to the point where the missile was launched. And so your effective range is actually much longer than what your max range lists. So in general, you would prefer to be the person doing the kiting when you're shooting missiles than the person being kited. The other thing to be aware of is interceptors and very fast frigates can and frequently do outrun your missiles, especially if they're already at a long range to begin with. And one last thing to remember, if you are a tackle frigate, then you are closing in to tackle a missile boat, such as a caracal, or I think a Prophecy is also a missile boat. Do not spiral in. Go straight to them. Spiraling in is done against gunboats, against turret users, because turrets can miss if your angular velocity is higher than their tracking speed. Missiles do not miss unless the missile doesn't actually reach you. And if you're going towards the target, then the missile will reach you. So the best thing is to get in as close as you can, as fast as you can. And that's usually in a straight line. Do be aware that if you are using a micro warp drive to close distance and tackle, you will be taking a lot more damage from the missiles, because the micro warp drive balloons your signature radius. And the signature radius is one of the major determining factors of missiles. So if you're in a frigate that has a 40-meter signature radius, and you turn on your micro warp drive, you now have a signature radius of 240. And that makes the bigger missiles do a lot more damage to you. Lara Divinity asks, what would be the total range with all skills maxed on heavy missiles? And to do that, I'm going to turn to my trusty Python fitting assistant. I probably shouldn't use a caracal for this, but it's the only one that I have fits for already. Do note that a caracal does have a 10% bonus to missile velocity per skill level of Caldari Cruiser. But a caracal with heavy missiles can hit out to 94.3 kilometers. Note that this is not the maximum range of every ship with heavy missiles. This is the maximum range of a caracal with heavy missiles. If you look at a Drake, a Drake with all 5 skills will be able to hit out to about 62.9 kilometers, which is still really good, considering that turret users will have horrible tracking at that range, whereas your missiles, if they're within, let's say, 55 kilometers, you will almost never miss. Acus Coitus asks, how do you determine what the maximum signature radius your missile can hit? Signature radius doesn't determine whether or not your missile hits. It determines how much damage the missile does. The larger their signature radius, the more damage it will do up to your missile's explosion radius. So if we look at a rocket has an explosion radius of 20 meters. That means anything with a signature radius bigger than 20 meters will not have reduced damage because of this feature. They might still take less damage if they're going more than 150 meters per second, but they will not take damage, or they will not take reduced damage due to the signature radius. So a heavy missile has an explosion radius of 140 meters. Given that frigates have about 40 meter signature radius, they'll take a little more than a quarter. No, actually, it's not linear. The actual equation is listed on this wiki page here. But to sum it up, a cruiser-sized missile, a heavy missile, will do full or nearly full damage to a battleship, but it's going to do a fraction of its damage to a frigate. And the difference is even bigger when you're using a battleship-sized weapon against a frigate, and even bigger than that when you're using a capital-sized missile against a frigate. The exact numbers are hard to calculate off the top of your head, specifically because it's not just the signature radius and the explosion radius. There's also a complicated term related to the velocity of the ship as well. But in short, if the ship's signature radius is bigger than the missile's explosion radius, then you'll do more damage. And if the ship's velocity is less than the explosion velocity, then you will do more damage. Any more questions? Lara Divinity asks, would it be better to mix up launchers? Generally, I don't think it's a good idea to mix up the launchers. Specifically because when you're dealing with the bigger ships, you want the increased damage from the bigger launcher. And for the smaller ships, you can use drones to take out the smaller ships. For example, a Drake has 6 launcher slots. I would fill those up with 6 heavy missile launchers. And the Drake also has a 25 cubic meter drone bay and 25 megabit per second, or megabyte per second, or whatever they want to call it. 25 drone bandwidth. So it can use a full flight of light drones. So you use your missiles on cruiser-sized enemies and above, and you put your drones on the frigate and destroyer-sized enemies. Obviously, that works even better with Tech 2 drones, but that's a subject for another class. Yeah, it's important to point out that the heavy missiles actually do more base damage. The heavy missile the Inferno heavy missile has a base unbonus damage of 135. The Inferno light missile has a base unbonus damage of 83. So right off the bat, you're already doubling the damage that you do per missile, or almost doubling the damage per missile against cruiser-sized enemies and above. anyone have any more questions, keep them coming. Going once. Going twice. Alright. Thank you guys for attending. I hope you learned something.
Thank you.
Again, if you want more detail about the specific equation for missile damage, take a look at that missile damage wiki page. It has the exact equation, which is too complicated to explain in a voice recording. Thanks everyone, and I'll stop the recording now.